Greetings folks and welcome to the Electromaker Show. This is your midweek roundup of all things maker and embedded and lovely. And on this week we will be looking at the updated Arduino IDE in the cloud, as well as the Arduino open source report that they put out each year, which is always a fascinating read. We'll be looking at a Raspberry Pi that is underwater and also how a Raspberry Pi stacks up against a regular N100 Intel NUC mini PC. I have been a little bit cruel about mini PCs in the past, and I'm very much willing to be proved right or wrong depending on which one comes out on top. We'll also be looking at a very powerful new MCU development board that's about to go live on Crowd Supply and various other things. So with all of that to get through, let's get on with this week's show. We are starting this week's show by taking a quick look at the Arduino Cloud and its latest update, which is bringing pretty much the entire functionality of the Arduino IDE into the cloud, into your browser, which is a very useful thing because as long as you have the Arduino agent on your system, which means not the full IDE, just the agent which allows the browser to speak to the USB port and everything it needs to do, then you can use pretty much any computer anywhere and have all of your sketches saved in a central location. And indeed, it's something I tested out. I messed around with it a little bit on my recording computer that I'm talking to you on now, and also on my laptop, and edited the same sketch, albeit a very easy one, on both without having to worry about where I was storing my files or anything like that. They were simply in the browser. It is not quite as snappy as the original IDE by any stretch of the imagination, but it is certainly a nice option to have. Now, for a full rundown of the Cloud IDE and everything that Arduino have added to the Arduino IoT Cloud, this blog post is a good catch-all for it. And I'll be linking this in the description of the video because it also links out to all the different articles about the new Arduino Cloud and the app that they have improved as well. And these are all linked out in the first part of the article, but it also gives you just a rough rundown as to what the differences are, because you've been able to program Arduinos from the cloud for a while, but the experience was somewhat different. It was a kind of stripped down version of the IDE, and there's nothing wrong with that in principle, but the IDE itself is by nature very simple to use. It's designed to be open and easy for beginners to use as much as anybody else, and so the stripped down version of the cloud was maybe not a necessary thing, but it's all part of the growing pains of getting a cloud platform together which is designed to be used by everybody instead of just engineers. And I personally think they've done quite a good job of it. I'd like to do a longer form thing about the Arduino Cloud at some point, because it's quite a mature thing these days. But yeah, I mean, you can see here, this seems very much like the Arduino IDE. You have your libraries down the side and all this kind of stuff. And I have it open over here as well. Although, rather than actually open a sketch here, I'll just show you some footage that I recorded of myself using it just a little while ago. And as you can see, what I'm doing here is incredibly simple. I have my Arduino Giga plugged into the computer up here, and I am by degrees taking a blink sketch and adding the serial monitor to it. Very, very high tech edge computing stuff we're doing here. But no, as you can see by, the IDE works like an IDE. It automatically detects what board you have plugged in. If I had one criticism, it would be that sometimes when I opened a new sketch or when I wanted to move backwards and forwards between things, it would lose the Arduino that was plugged in, and it would need to find it again. Which was only annoying when I went into a sketch. Iterating was quite easy. Once it was plugged in, it was plugged in. The cloud serial monitor is quite nice. It works exactly as a serial monitor would. You can turn on timestamps, which is nice, and you can also download timestamped logs as CSV files. And I think you'll see me doing that and realizing I have nothing that opens CSV files on my desktop computer, strangely enough. We live in the cloud these days in more than one way. But yes, if you are interested in finding out more about the Arduino Cloud, rather than me harp on about it, this blog post goes through it in great detail. It's just something I wanted to bring attention to, because even if you are someone who uses the Arduino IDE all the time, or you use something like Platform IO, or it's not something you use at all, knowing that you can just put a simple agent onto a computer that no one will need to worry about, and then use the browser when you're, say, with someone or a family member who you're wanting to teach how to use an Arduino, and you just need to plug it in and you can get going, and that all of their sketches will be saved in the cloud. You could even give an Arduino to someone as a gift, for an example, and then they could take them through how they could do it. And if they're struggling with their code, provided that they're happy to let you into their cloud space, you could help them with their code in the cloud. Which is one of the things that kind of occurred to me about it, which is a nice difference between that and a purely offline IDE. I'm sure I'm missing some good and bad things, but this is, of course, where you come in. I'm always very interested to hear your opinions about these things. And Arduino I've really been pushing to make things better than ever, really. I feel like with the change in the documentation last year, they unified it all and made it all fit together a bit nicer, and even reflected in the kind of hardware that they're putting out. A Nano that fits every corner of the market, but that's easy for beginners to use. The Pro line, which comes down in price in order to allow people to afford it, and then the normal line, which gets ridiculously good. Like, oh, I almost pulled that out of the USB port. Like the Arduino Giga, which is an obscenely powerful microcontroller development board with a DAC and a USB port and a bunch of nice things on it. And yet it falls into the normal Arduino line and receives the same amount of support as all of them. It's all very nice stuff. And if you are thinking of trying the Arduino Cloud out and are looking for a new Arduino with which to try it with, then consider buying it from us at Electromaker. It supports us hugely. It's the best way you can financially support our show, and you can find the shop at electromaker.io/shop, where we sell Arduinos, Raspberry Pis, and pretty much everything else you could ever want. So yes, everything that you buy from that really does help us, and thank you all of you that shop there already. Sticking with Arduino, we're going to briefly talk about the Arduino open source report for 2023. Now, they put out an open source report every year, which basically just is a hand-in-hand thing of sort of like what Arduino are doing for open source and sort of just what Arduino have been doing, because it is an open source hardware and software project after all. And it always is an interesting read, and I'm not going to go through the entire thing because it's quite a long PDF document. I'm not going to go through all 30-something pages of it on the episode right now, but it is always worth a look. A couple of things jumped out to me that I didn't realize quite how much had come out all in one year. So, for example, if I scroll down a little bit, things like the MicroPython installer for Arduino and the Arduino Lab, which is their MicroPython specific IDE, and the package index, that all happened this year. MicroPython and Arduino. A lot of Arduino boards supported MicroPython, sure, but it wasn't necessarily part of the Arduino ecosystem. But releasing all of those new boards that were MicroPython ready, like the ESP32 variant of the Nano, for example, meant that they had to think about, okay, how are beginners going to do this without having to step outside and use lots of different bits of software in order to talk to the boards? And it goes both ways as well. It's something I haven't really looked into, but I am sort of somewhat familiar with, is this idea of the pluggable discovery for DFU devices, which is part of a larger idea that Arduino aren't just trying to make their boards usable with the Arduino ecosystem. The idea is a huge amount of things are programmable using the Arduino IDE. It is one of the go-to ways of saying, how do you program this random piece of hardware that someone's come up with? Well, they've made it IDE compatible, and that seems to be working both ways. One thing I do also like about this entire thing is that every single slide has a thing at the bottom saying how you can get involved. And it can be through actually getting involved in testing the IDE, or joining the open source development team to improve and iterate upon things, or even stuff like with the open source hardware boards. They released the new Uno revision 4s this year, which we talked about a lot. I mean, everyone talked about a lot. And the Arduino Uno is something that I really want to come back and talk about, because I still think it's just such a wonderful thing that they took the original idea of the Uno, turned it into quite a powerful 32-bit controller, but made it completely backwards compatible by using a completely new Renesas chip, which is one of the only ones that remains the 5-volt compatibility. But yeah. I could rant for a while, but here's the thing that unsurprisingly, since I have recently gone down the Zephyr rabbit hole somewhat myself, I'm very happy to see that Arduino are getting involved with Zephyr. I absolutely understand that Zephyr is something that some people find utterly frustrating and have no time or place for. I have very much only scratched the surface of it and can see how at some point in the future it might be the way I want to do things. I have a lot of learning to do before then, but fundamentally I like Zephyr. I like what they're doing. They seem like good people with a good vision, and I'm very happy to see that Arduino are one of the many, many names who are now on board with this idea of turning this wonderful RTOS firmware ecosystem framework and making it work with pretty much all hardware everywhere. One code, many bits of hardware, fun. Anyhow, I will link to this blog post in the description of the video. You can find a link there to the report that I clicked and it opened it in the browser for me. These are always really nice to read. I always look forward to the yearly report from Arduino because it is very much a, hey, look what we've done, but they're always very hopeful, and they always really push the fact that this is an open project to the point that they're saying, please do remix these boards, innovate them, and share your builds. They want to see what you can do with what they are building. Now, CES has just been upon us in Las Vegas, which is the huge consumer trade show, which of course encompasses a lot more than kind of embedded things. But Raspberry Pi were there, and as were a company called HZO. And they had something quite special to show off, which was a Raspberry Pi coexisting peacefully with water. And yes, I do mean water. Las Vegas bathroom tap water. In fact, the person who filled this basin is in the comment section of this Raspberry Pi blog, saying, someone was saying, I bet the water is very deionized, distilled, and they said, oh, I can attest this. In fact, good old-fashioned Las Vegas bathroom tap water. Source, me. I filled it myself. So I'm assuming Ryan Moore is someone from HZO, the company who are behind this. This is a normal Raspberry Pi, and it is running underwater, but with one key difference. It has been coated with a very special coating from a company, HZO, whose, well, unsurprisingly, their company is designed to make things waterproof. And the proof is very much in the pudding, and the pudding is very much underwater. Now, over on the HZO website is a video that goes to show this isn't the first time that they have done this. In fact, since 2014, they have been showcasing Raspberry Pis underwater as part of their exhibit. And what you're seeing here is the film of a screen. And as it pans out, you will see that the screen is, well, it's a screen on a wall, and the cable from that screen is going down into a tank. And in that tank is a much older model of Raspberry Pi, which is, playing the demo reel. And as it says here, it played for over 35 hours without while being completely submerged in water without a case being necessary. Now, one of the things the original Raspberry Pi blog post shows, which will be the one I link in the description because I just got to HZO's website via this link here, and the video that we just looked at via this link above it. But it mentions there's a couple of different ways that they do it. The Parylene coating process and the plasma applied coating process, and you can find more information about both of those things on the website, including for example, the plasma applied nano coatings. They select a material from their portfolio of chemical compositions that meet your needs, and excite that material through plasma, the fourth state of matter, to kickstart a chemical reaction that forms a reliable thin film conformal coating. I recognized some of those words. But yes, this is really quite a special thing to see, isn't it? When you think of all of the ins and outs that comprise an open circuit board computer, or a single board computer, as I suppose we have been calling them for years, and all the places that water could get inside and break it, it is quite an impressive thing to see. And also, just what a wonderful thing to be able to bring to your event. What do you do as a company? Oh, we stop things getting wet. How do you do it? Up next, for the very first time on Electromaker, we have a sponsored section. This episode of the Electromaker is brought to you by NEXTPCB. Now, to find out more about the online version of their Gerber viewer, there is a blog on the NEXTPCB website, which we will be linking in the description of this video, which takes you through the details of the PCB viewer. And bear in mind that this is a viewer that can be used by all. They do have Windows software, but they have incorporated that functionality into the browser version, and it continues to be updated. In fact, there's about to be a quite big update to it, which I will talk about in just a moment. Now, a member of our Discord server, Mail Studio, took our Electromaker PCB ruler and turned it into a working circuit by adding a few components. And let's take the Gerber files from this PCB ruler and drop it into the online Gerber viewer right now. So I'm grabbing the zip file, dropping it here, and it is now going to analyze the file. And the reason it analyzes the files is that not only is this a way to let you view your Gerber files online, it will also run through and check for problems with your files. In fact, if I move myself out of the way, I am somewhat in the way here, you will see immediately that you can see that the ruler is here. We can look at it. You can see exactly how Mail Studio made that work, because we have the battery coin cell holder here. The traces run through the place where the push switch goes, and then runs to the LEDs on the end through the resistor, as you saw on the video we just watched. But also, it turns out that our wonderful Electromaker rulers have a bit of a problem. We do not have enough of the board edge clearance. And if you just wanted to see what errors your PCB has, you can just click the errors only side of things here. And if you want to find out more, you can download a report, which will download it to your local machine and tell you any issues that you might have with your device. Again, you can't see this because of the screen grabbing software, but this just downloads a PDF file, which you can then open and find out if there are any issues. And here is that report. And if we look through, our Electromaker ruler actually fails here in a few particular situations. The pad spacing is too small, the pad size is too small, the board edge clearance is too small. There's a number of things on here which are all very important pieces of information, because if you are a bit of an amateur when it comes to PCB design, much like I am, these are things that you might not see, because when I see this, I just think it looks good. Yeah, having something like this which is completely free to use and in the browser, I don't know if you noticed, but I did not even have to sign in to use this, for example, is a wonderful tool to have, and it's about to get much better. I'll also be leaving a link to this blog on the NEXTPCB website in the description of the video about design for assembly. Now, NEXTPCB have offered design for manufacturing for quite a while, something that will look at your PCB design and go through any potential issues with it. In fact, we just saw that in action in the Gerber viewer here. It already found some issues by analyzing our Gerber file, and so before we even go to the next stage of production, we can change the issues on our PCB. They're now going to extend this to design for assembly, and design for assembly is taking that concept and moving it into the realm of entire builds. What are you going to put on your, well, in my case, ruler? Are all of your components the right size? The case study here uses a resistor footprint which is designed for a larger resistor than the bill of materials specified. The footprint is for an 0806 resistor, the resistor itself is an 0402. The design for assembly solution to this will be to either change the footprint or substitute the part in the bill of materials before sending it off to assembly, which means you don't have to reorder parts, which means there's going to be no slowdown in your assembly. This is something that NEXTPCB are going to be offering for free to their turnkey PCB customers starting very, very soon, and it is absolutely relevant to what we've just been talking about, because I don't know if you noticed while we were looking at this, once you have your Gerber file here, it is but a number of clicks in order to get that PCB manufactured or assembled with the parts that you need, all through the NEXTPCB website. NEXTPCB also offer free prototyping and testing for businesses. You can find out about all of that in the link under this video. Thank you once again, NEXTPCB, for sponsoring this edition of the Electromaker Show. It is time to return to funding website things. That's right, this is the part of the show where we talk about things on funding websites, and we're going to be returning to crowd supply. I've talked about many wonderful things on crowd supply over the years. If you're not familiar with it, it is Kickstarter, but just for awesome embedded devices and adjacent things. There's a lot of amazing software-defined radio things on there, there's a lot of amazing IoT things on there, and this is just a really high-spec and nicely put-together idea for a development board. It is a pre-launch project, there's no price to this yet, but the specs of this dev board make it really quite interesting, and there's only a few other dev boards I can think of that come close. So what is it? This is the Aventen Formosa Sync, a high-performance dev board that runs at up to 1 GHz, although the NXP I.MX RT crossover chip on it runs at 600 MHz. Normally it's just overclockable. Provides support for Wi-Fi 5, Bluetooth 5.1, Ethernet, battery management, USB on the go, and micro SD storage. So already there's a couple of things that jump out to me there. The fact that you get the Wi-Fi and battery management on board is nice. A lot of boards do that, of course. Most of the Adafruit Featherline, for example, include that. But let's not forget that the controller on here, the microcontroller itself, is up there with the Teensy 4 in terms of pure processing power. If you don't overclock it, I believe the 600 MHz processor on it is the same as the Teensy 4. I don't think it's necessarily the same chip. I can't remember what chip is on the Teensy. But yes, it's one of the as I mentioned before, one of the NXP I.MX RT series. I don't know exactly which one. Ah, yes, MIMX RT 106SDVL6B, which is a name. It also has a fair amount of PS, RAM and flash, and as previously mentioned, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Ethernet, although of course you'll need to put your own Ethernet connector on it, and a built-in SD card reader, USB Type-C, and USB on the go. But I think the thing that most people are going to find interesting about this, it's from two different perspectives I can think this will be interesting, because people are already quite familiar with embedded programming and are looking for a very powerful but small footprint board with a lot of things on board are going to be very happy with this. It has software debugging, it has JTAG, it has all of the ways that you would normally speak to it. But from the other end of the spectrum, if you're looking to get into some slightly more higher powered work, for example, this does share that thing with the Teensy in that this will be Arduino IDE and Platform IO compatible, which puts it in a really interesting position. It's an absurdly powerful board, but it's actually going to be really good for a lot of people. The only thing we don't know about it so far is the price, which is why we will leave this there for now. This is definitely one we'll come back to, because it's rare that a development board comes along and you kind of think, oh, that's actually a little bit different in some ways to the others. I mean, in many ways it's not. It has a lot of the same things as many other development boards that you could buy. But yeah, I thought the mixture of things on it and the raw power, and of course the USB Type-C connector, which I'm not going to shut up about. Every time a new board with USB Type-C connector comes out, I think I want to say well done to that behavior and discourage any other behavior. But we'll come back to this when there is a price to it, because if this thing is competitive in terms of price, it will be a really interesting board for various projects. I mean, having this much processing power on something which presumably could be also taught to act with quite a low power in mind is interesting indeed, and we'll come back to it when it is launched. The final thing we're going to look at this week is a project from Alice Barber, or Alice Barb. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your surname. It's a wonderful project, including the printer from a cash register, and I think I'm just going to let it speak for itself briefly. Yes, in case it wasn't obvious, this is a karaoke machine that works using a shop printer, as we've just seen, but there's a lot more to it than just that. It doesn't just give you the lyrics on time. It's supposed to at least track your voice and then perform a fast Fourier transform on it so that it knows the pitch that you're singing, and then change the pitch of the music in order to make you always sing in tune. Now, at this particular point, I don't think that part of this is working. This project is by Alice Barber, and as it says, it's submitted to the Royal Hackaway #2, which is something I'm only just hearing about. It's very, really interesting stuff. We're going to come back and talk about this at some point. But yes, as you can see here, we bought a 15 quid till printer with 10 rolls of paper from eBay and wanted to do something with it. Have you ever wanted to burst into song at the checkout line, had a childhood fascination with till printers, Kaching karaoke, or as I am going to keep calling it, the Rick Till roll? Lets you sing karaoke the old school retro way you've always wanted. Lyrics fed to you from a till printer. It also aims to pitch shift the song to match what you're singing, so you're always in tune, as I mentioned it. So it's technically a USB printer device, but can be shared virtually as a parallel port printer. As such, we can send byte messages to the printer following the manufacturer's ESC-POS protocol and get stuff to print out. We grab the karaoke song from YouTube, lyrics from some random website, and sync up the printer to the song's playback. The audio processing part is more complicated and doesn't quite work. The song gets pitch shifted by getting the computer mouse to fiddle with VLC tool settings while the song is playing, because they couldn't find a good library to do real-time pitch shifting with. And on the very off-random chance that whoever made this sees this and you would like to keep working on this, I'd love to be a part of it. I did check the GitHub page. I was going to see if I could pull it and do some work, but there's a git ignore, and that's it in here. But what a wonderful idea. This is exactly the kind of thing that I love, when you take something just because you feel like you want to have it, and then get it to do something completely different. So that has been our show for this week. Thank you so much for supporting us, and thank you to NEXTPCB for finally giving us a sponsored section. It's really nice after all this time to sort of attract that kind of thing. I'm very interested to hear what you think of pretty much everything in this episode, but especially the Aventen Formosa sync. That seems like a very powerful little development board, and the only other board that came to mind to me was the TNC4, but of course that's missing a bunch of extra things on it, like the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. I don't know if the TNC4 has USB on the go, but I also don't think it has battery management on board, for example. In fact, I know it doesn't. I have one over there. So yes, I'm very interested to hear what you think of that, and as always, I'm very interested to hear what you are up to, what you are working on. Please do let me know in the comment section of this video, and until next time, I hope you have a fun, safe, and creative week. Bye bye.